ACT branch of the AIIA. My name is Mr Branch President. I hope you really enjoyed the special Christmas fair this evening after a long and eventful year. And I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which we live and pay my respects to elders past and present. In the course of the year, branches have good opportunity to explore the Indo-Pacific concepts with presentations by the Indonesian ambassador and our annual dinner speaker, Professor Minka from the National Security College, amongst others. Tonight, we will hear a further perspective on the rise of the Indo-Pacific from one of the key players in the region, Europe. Our speaker will give us India's views on the geo-political and geo-economic changes occurring in the region, how Australia and India are progressing their dynamic relationship in the regional context and bilaterally. That His Excellency Mr Manpreet Vohra, the High Commissioner for Australia, could join us to lead this discussion. His Excellency joined the Indian Foreign Service in 1908. His ambassadorial appointments to Mexico and to Belize from 2019 to 2021, to Afghanistan in 2016 to 18, to in 2011-2015. So served in Pakistan, and Nairobi, where he was India's permanent representative to the UN Environment Program and UN Habitat. And His Excellency has also served in Hong Kong, China, and the United Kingdom. He has a BA in economics and a postgraduate in international trade from Punjab University in Chandigarh. He began his appointment in Australia in April 2021. This is the first time that he has addressed the Institute, and we're very glad that he can be with us. Now, as the format this evening, as per normal, the Commissioner will speak for about 20 minutes or so. That's great, 25. And before we go to questions from participants after that, both in house and from those online using the Q&A function on Zoom. So we're going to finish at 8:30 p.m. tonight, folks. So without any further ado, Commissioner, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Manpreet Vohra, for that very long introduction. Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. It is an honor for me to address you at this end of the function of the Australian Institute of International Affairs, ACT Branch. I understand that AIIA was recently ranked as the top independent think tank in Australia. Hence, it is truly a privilege to be invited here tonight. I believe the council member, Mr. Bradley Innes, had suggested my name after he heard me speak to the Royal Environmental Society 2 months ago. I suppose I must have done something right if you suffered me again and you take the risk of working upon the rest of you. Perhaps Hollywood notes exchanged. So such a cause and remember us. The Christmas and the New Year will bring more peace and joy, as also less conflict and deprivation for everyone, everywhere. Let me share with you some thoughts on the topic India, Australia, and the Indo-Pacific. The title itself suggests a certain relevance, perhaps even a convergence among its three parts. But two of them, India and Australia, are nation states, one a continent, the other a subcontinent, both ancient civilizations, while the third, the Indo-Pacific, is a relatively new construct that some remain reluctant even to adopt into the lexicon, even as certain others are condemning and vilifying it already as some sort of new evil empire. So what is the Indo-Pacific? Is it merely a place or a space, an exercise in cartography, stretching westward what was generally understood to be the boundaries of the well-known Asia Pacific? Is it an acknowledgement of the untenability of the long-held notion, at least since 1945, and as long as American strategic dominance remained uncontested, that countries adjunct to the Indian and Pacific Oceans could be separately treated and strategized for? Is it a readjustment of foreign and defense policies, shifting focus from continental to maritime security? Or does the Indo-Pacific reflect a much deeper and lasting shift in the way major global powers now perceive this region and the intertwining of their economic imperatives, security interests, and strategic competition with it? In my humble view, it is all of the above. It is an acceptance of the fact that even if you were to still call it Asia Pacific, it would be self-defeating to continue to restrict the definition only to the Pacific Rim countries and not include at least adjoining nations such as India, a very large democratic country and market economy that is now not only the fastest growing, but one with major stakes in the region that also brings to it the same set of values, liberties, and rule of law that much of the world wishes to guard, but which are increasingly under threat from other different systems with their alarming ambitions and monochromatic vision of how the world should be ordered and how people and societies should be governed. Meanwhile, the largely Atlantic-centered post-Second World War bipolar order is dead, while multilateralism has failed to preserve either lasting peace and security or sustained economic progress and unimpeded commerce. In other words, the so-called rules-based international order is under serious challenge. In recent years, nowhere is this more apparent than in the Indo-Pacific region, notwithstanding the ongoing major conflict and talk of a third world war taking place once again in good old Europe. Make no mistake, ladies and gentlemen, the real strategic long-term great power contestation has shifted to this region, and it is no longer just in the realm of hard military might, but encompasses political, economic, technological, and soft power as well. Thankfully for many of us, the United States is repositioned back in the Indo-Pacific, but this time with the realization that it can no longer go it alone, and that the emergence of India, the increased external engagement of Japan and Australia, the wider interests of South Korea, the broader outlook of ASEAN, and the shifting sands in the Middle East are all transformations which, while they may not yet make for what we can call a new multipolar world, more stable and highly desirable, as many of us believe that would be, they do present pragmatic opportunities to stitch up trusting partnerships and synergize efforts with like-minded countries, each of whom carry with them valuable heft and considerable weight in various domains and can rightly be called at least middle powers or even emerging poles. Seen in this light too, the concept of the Indo-Pacific appears both apt and attractive. Maps and terms can be significant in and of themselves. Let me read to you this excerpt from the absorbing book, The Contest for the Indo-Pacific, by the brilliant Professor Rory Medcalf, who has addressed you here. of the National Security Council College. He says, and I quote, "At one level, the Indo-Pacific counts simply as an idea, describing and imagining a region that has become the global center of strategic and economic gravity, just as the North Atlantic was for much of the 19th and 20th centuries. But there is a practical point too. Words shape the world. An imagined space on a map both reflects and influences real and palpable things like military deployments, patterns of prosperity, and calculations of risk among the world's most powerful states." Unquote. While Australia, Japan, and India were the first to rename their region as the Indo-Pacific some years ago, the world was somewhat more benign at the time, and the initial focus was largely on the security of sea lanes linking the Pacific and Indian Oceans, and a dynamic coupling as seas of freedom and prosperity in broader Asia, as Prime Minister Shinzo Abe had described it. Later, its potential as a transformational economic corridor of trade, investments, and growth became evident to others, such as the United States. Around the same time, extraordinary and revanchist territorial claims, coupled with real physical aggression and economic coercion, attempts at political interference, bullying, and elite capture by a major power in the region, and I suppose you all know which one, made it an unavoidable geopolitical discourse with a strategic salience, leading then to a counter-determination among like-minded partners to ensure what we call a free and open Indo-Pacific. Since it is grounded in the actual reality of events, threats, and challenges facing the Indo-Pacific, the term and the concept acquired an almost irrepressible logic and has been picked up quickly by receptive audiences and governments in practically every significant country. There is, of course, one major capital that rejects it, but ironically, the vehemence of its attack in itself vouches for the relevance and importance of the Indo-Pacific as a counterweight, as an alternate model, and as a geopolitical rebalancing message in itself. There is perhaps no analyst or commentator today who doubts that security, stability, peace, and prosperity of the Indo-Pacific region is vital for the world at large. The Indo-Pacific is a significant expanse of geography, with 65% of the world's oceans and 25% of its land. It is home to over 64% of the world's population, including 58% of all youth. It accounts for 62% of the global GDP and 2/3 of global growth. Over 50% of world trade traverses this maritime domain. Whether it is trade and investment, connectivity and travel, or geopolitics and security, what begins in the Indo-Pacific Oceans no longer ends there. Be they shipping and sea lanes, supply chains and markets, or resources and competition. It is essential that the Indo-Pacific endures and flourishes to ensure future security and prosperity, not just of us in the region, but also of our friends and partners beyond it. That is why the region must be governed by commonly agreed international norms, rules, and practices, and that is why those who desire this end state must work together. India subscribes to this creed, ladies and gentlemen, as does Australia. The Indo-Pacific is of great salience to us. As an ancient maritime nation, India is all too familiar with the region that spans both these oceans. Our engagement with it spans centuries and includes civilizational, cultural, trade, and people-to-people exchanges. In a more contemporary sense, the Indo-Pacific represents India's modern widening interests and its new partnerships. In our approach, the region stretches from the western coast of North America to the eastern shores of Africa, somewhat larger than Australia's current outlook. It is growing in importance, and it is critical to India's future. 90% of India's trade travels on its waters. It is the most dynamic, innovative, and fastest growing part of the world. India's own rise has placed it well at the center, as has Australia's. For both of us, this shift in economic trajectory from the Atlantic to the Indo-Pacific is important. We are convinced that the destiny of the world will be deeply influenced by the course of developments in the Indo-Pacific region. India's Act East policy, therefore, is being pursued more vigorously and with greater conviction than ever before in our history. Australia's ASEAN focus and Pacific step-up policies mirror the same belief and intent. For us too, the unity and centrality of ASEAN is fundamental. India has taken the lead to establish a regional architecture in the region, of which the 23 nation and 10 dialogue partners Indian Ocean Rim Association and the 35 navies Indian Ocean Naval Symposium are notable examples contributing to deepening mutual understanding on maritime challenges and encouraging a collective approach. Our friend Australia is an important member of both. 3 years ago, we also started the Indo-Pacific Oceans Initiative with 7 important pillars of cooperation, which are maritime security, marine ecology and resources, capacity building, disaster risk reduction and management, science and technology and academic cooperation, trade, connectivity, and maritime transport. We are pleased that Australia is chairing the marine ecology pillar. India has sought to strengthen security and freedom of navigation in the Indo-Pacific by becoming a net security provider. We have built close relationships with countries across the region, and particularly with Australia, with whom we are now a comprehensive strategic partner. The Indian Navy's Information Fusion Center for the Indian Ocean region, which is based just outside New Delhi and is also staffed with Australian officers, among others, has enhanced maritime domain awareness among partner countries. India also participates in anti-piracy operations in the Gulf of Aden. We have stepped up our military, Navy, and Air Force exercises in the region with more frequency and increasing complexity, perhaps none greater than with Australia in both bilateral and multilateral formats. Even as we speak, Australian and Indian land forces are training together and sharing expertise in multi-domain operations in the deserts of Rajasthan. Last year, we started our 2+2 Foreign and Defense Ministers Dialogue, a format that India has with very few close partners. We have recently operationalized our mutual logistics support agreement. Indian maritime surveillance aircraft now land in and deploy from Darwin, and Australian aircraft from Goa. In terms of assisting with hard capabilities, in February this year, India signed a contract to supply supersonic anti-ship cruise missiles, the BrahMos, arguably best in class in the world, to the Philippines. More are expected to follow with some other countries. India's dynamic defense manufacturing industry is producing top-class, sophisticated, yet cost-effective platforms that could be useful to many friends and partners in the Indo-Pacific as they seek to beef up their deterrence and defense preparedness. India is also a committed, nimble, and able first responder at times of disasters, cataclysmic events, and health pandemics. Our HADR assistance has taken many forms across regions, most recently in Kiribati and Tonga, not far from here, with last-mile delivery often aided by Australian assets. We have set up FIPIC, or the Forum for India-Pacific Islands Cooperation, to strengthen our outreach to the Pacific Island countries. Australia is a major player here, and there are opportunities for us to do more together. Our development partnerships in the Indo-Pacific are diverse and encompass financial assistance, technical cooperation, capacity building, and infrastructure projects, all of which meet the needs of our friends and are guided by their socioeconomic priorities and their preferred development roadmaps. We deploy significant resources, but they are demand-driven and not dictated by us. We do not saddle receiving countries with white elephants or with sugar-coated loans that quickly morph into unsustainable debt and threaten sovereignty. This is a practical demonstration of our goodwill and our responsible conduct, unlike the all too familiar egregious practices of a major player in our region that has famously brought some countries to their knees and on the brink of economic collapse. Ladies and gentlemen, in recent times, we have seen several countries and associations, including in far-off Europe and North America, articulating their vision and strategies for the Indo-Pacific. India welcomes this trend, as does Australia, which is an indication not just of the growing significance of our region and the importance of maintaining peace, prosperity, stability, and a rules-based order in the Indo-Pacific, but also of the threats to it. The recent revival and rapid maturing of the Quad, with us 4 like-minded partners getting together with a sense of real purpose to guard global commons and offer alternate and better options to our friends in the Indo-Pacific, is a telling manifestation of the shifting sands of geopolitics and geoeconomics and its new realities. These are major challenges, even existential for some on the front lines. It is also clear that they cannot be addressed with outdated systems or old beliefs, either in the global leadership of a few or in the effectiveness of the multilateral system as it exists, or as it has evolved, or as it has been allowed to degenerate. The lack of coordinated or cooperative global responses that we see more and more of have exposed these vulnerabilities and weaknesses of the multilateral order. Most recently, the COVID pandemic has laid bare the fault lines from excessive dependencies that have either been willfully engineered or unwittingly overlooked by the world. These include the alarming near deindustrialization of many of us and the fickle supply chains unabashedly weaponized into critical global shortages and tools of political coercion by those who control them. As I said, these are major challenges of present and future security that are crying out for solutions. And I haven't even mentioned kinetic conflicts or arms races or cyber wars or the militarization of outer space. They underline the pressing need for comprehensive reform, a fresh global approach, and a new global solidarity. Since we in India still subscribe to our ancient dictum that the world is one family, we have been calling for this reformed multilateralism that will enable a more stable multipolar world order to emerge. Sadly, I'm not optimistic that this will come to pass anytime soon. In the meantime, therefore, we are all reappraising priorities, strategies, relationships, and even strategic geography. We are scrambling to adjust to the rapid flux and the growing uncertainty. Long-standing assumptions are being revisited by India, by Australia, and by many others. We are searching for reliable and resilient partners. Those with shared values and a common vision obviously fit the bill more perfectly. At least some of us can band together, pool our resources, our convening power, and our comparative advantages to face the challenge, try to improve the state of affairs, and make a positive difference. These minilateral or plurilateral approaches are reflective of our times, and such a focused effort is what the Quad countries are attempting. Since this collective effort will directly impinge on the nefarious designs and objectives of some adversaries, it is hardly surprising that they seek to paint the Quad as some sort of military alliance or an Asian NATO. This narrative and scaremongering will continue, perhaps even get shriller, and India, Australia, Japan, and USA will need to counter it constantly, not through a war of words, but through actual demonstration of the Quad's effectiveness as a grouping that brings tangible benefits and better options for our Indo-Pacific partners, enabling them to make sovereign and free choices. We want them to see that we are neither subjecting them to domination nor trapping them in any binary power rivalry. We frame the Quad by what we do together and not by how others may describe us. If in the process it worries some that it is really a counterbalancing force, then so be it, and I see no harm in any perceived deterrent value. Some of the economic challenges I have alluded to, particularly the concentration risk in international trade, means that building diversified, resilient, and trusted supply chains is a priority for Indo-Pacific nations. It is also a key area of focus in international relations today. In this endeavor too, besides our bilateral efforts, India and Australia have teamed up with Japan, and we have launched our Trilateral Supply Chain Resilience Initiative. Another challenge, an acute one for us in the Indo-Pacific, and one which Australia is especially facing a lot of, is in the digital domain. Digital technology and cybersecurity will undoubtedly be an important determinant of our sovereignty, safety, and competitiveness in this century. I'm happy that India and Australia have advanced tools and capabilities, a high level of complementarity and trust, and convergent views on evolving data standards and global norms. India is already an IT giant and a leader in creating public digital infrastructure. It offers scale and sophistication that can create productive partnerships for next generation digital and telecom capabilities and standards. Our mutual trust opens up vast opportunities for cooperation in cybersecurity. And together, we can also extend India's transformative use of digital infrastructure to change the lives of ordinary people and support inclusive development elsewhere, especially in the Indo-Pacific region and the small island developing states. Ladies and gentlemen, as you can see, Australia is a country that has grown exponentially in importance for India in recent years. And I dare say India too is a priority country for Australia. Considering that till about 15 years ago, India and Australia considered each other to be somewhat distant and rather aloof, with even a fairly frigid period following our 1998 nuclear weapons tests, the transformation of our relations today has been nothing short of remarkable. There are good reasons for this reappraisal and fresh discovery by either country of the value in the other and of the win-win proposition for both through closer collaboration and greater interdependence. This realization has translated into working together in new and multiple domains, from traditional security to contemporary challenges to futuristic technologies. In turn, those closer and more frequent interactions have led to a virtuous cycle of greater trust, candid conversations, understanding, and goodwill. The higher comfort level has allowed the carving of new, even path-breaking agreements between us. As I said, there are several reasons that have brought India and Australia closer together. The rapidly growing Indian diaspora in Australia, over 750,000 today, a big student community, impressive tourist numbers, and solid sporting ties have meant that our people-to-people links are strong, expanding, and serving as living bridges between us. Another factor is economic. Our trade has grown quite rapidly to over $27 billion per annum. For Australia, India is today its 7th largest trading partner and a major destination for export of its mineral and metal resources. But trade is below potential, which is why the new free trade agreement that we were able to negotiate quickly and which will enter into force on the 29th of December, 3 weeks from today, hold so much promise. In this, India has provided new market access to Australia of a level that we have not granted so far to any other country. Beyond just trade, there is also today a strong shared sense that India and Australia can help each other grow and transform. In Australia, there is the new realization that its future prosperity and security can no longer rely on any single country alone. Similarly, Australian companies simply cannot remain producers and exporters of primary commodities only. They must also diversify into processing, value addition, and manufacturing. This is where Indian companies can enable them to chart new pathways through investment flows and creation of value chains. Likewise, India's economic growth also needs another quantum jump. This requires productivity improvements, more innovation, more high technology, more research and development, and better practices in all sectors: agriculture, industry, and services. These are strengths of Australia, which India can benefit from, and we are already engaged in several important collaborative activities and projects. Similarly, India needs an assured large-scale supply of critical minerals and rare earths for its vast e-mobility and clean energy programs. And Australia is among the largest producer and exporter of many of these. Thanks to some cutting-edge research, Australia also has impressive innovation and valuable IPR in photovoltaic technologies. We can not only tie up long-term offtake arrangements, but also create enduring value chains by integrating Australian companies with end manufacturers in India of PV panels and storage batteries. We are also working with Australia on green hydrogen. In closing, ladies and gentlemen, let me say that the various political, strategic, and economic pillars of the India-Australia relationship have matured quite rapidly, and bilateral relations have perhaps never been better. Having moved well beyond the 3 C's of curry, Commonwealth, and cricket that defined our limited ties earlier, it is today a very forward-looking partnership for the future and enjoys firm bipartisan support in both countries. Thank you. Merry Christmas once again.
Thank you so much for those important comments, High Commissioner. And it's refreshing that we only heard one reference to the 3 C's during a discussion about Australia and India. Now, we have a lot of expertise about international security and India-Australia relations in this room, so I'm hopeful that there will be some good questions. When I see a hand, I'll respond to it. And if you could identify yourself and just wait for Edward with the mic. And John has the first call.
Excellency, John Blackson from the ANU. Thank you. It was a fantastic presentation. And it's great that you featured so many aspects of what's going on between our two countries. It's phenomenal. It strikes me, though, that, you know, you mentioned 1998. This seems so sudden and so steep a rise in the bilateral relationships. Do you think are there fundamentals there that can sustain this? Is this something that is a passing phenomenon, or is it an enduring one? And Kishore Mahbubani, the kind of maverick former Singaporean diplomat, said, it's kind of echoing Bill Clinton when he said that's the economy stupid, was saying, critical of the Quad, was saying it really has, if India is not prepared to buy into the RCEP and the United States is not prepared to buy into the CPP or TCPPP, I think it is, we're losing the focus on the main game, the economics. Is India serious about the economics? I mean, the trade relationship with Australia speak. Is there hope that India is going to rise to the occasion on leading in international economic and trade matters? Or is it going to leave that field to others? Thank you.
Want me to
Yes,
take them one by one? Yeah.
That's all right.
No, thank you. Thank you very much. I thought a large part of my presentation did talk about the fundamentals, you know, and the fact that there is this actual realization and acknowledgement now that there is value and complementarity in this partnership between India and Australia. And if you look at the trajectory, it's been consistently upwards and fairly steeply upwards ever since we kind of made up, as it were, around 2007. As I said, there was this period post 1998 when Australia was, well, in my opinion, excessively picked and not quite understanding of why we were forced to do what we did in 1998. But once Australia kind of concluded that, enough was enough, and that, we got to look beyond that particular incident, the value in what Australia brings to what India brings to the relationship was very much obvious, clearly, to your leadership and to your experts and officials. That was also the time when the sustained economic growth of India, which had started in the 1990s, mid-1990s, had become very evident. Even at that time, I still remember about 12 or 13 years ago, there was one particular year, even then, when India had grown faster than China. So it was evident, the size of our market, the nature of our market, which was completely unsatiated, as it were, and the rise of this middle class, which numbers anything from a couple of 100 million to 500 or 600 million, depending on the product or service or market segmentation. All of that meant that, that there was this great opportunity. Then you had the diaspora links. Then you had the links of science and technology, where again, India was beginning to show that, it has considerable value that it can bring on in certain fields, particularly, sunrise area like information and communication technologies, etc. Regarding the trade arrangements, RCEP and TPP, etc. Look, we decided some time back when we walked away from the RCEP. As you know, we negotiated seriously and with the RCEP or in the creation of the RCEP for years. But we realized at the end of it that it was not panning out in the way we would have liked to see it, that it was still being too one-sided. It was all about opening up markets to industrial goods, lowering tariffs, et cetera, for industrial goods. Our comparative advantage, which is services, which is labor mobility, all of that, were being given short shrift. So other than a kind of a promise that, hey, we look at it at some point, it wasn't. So we said, no, we've had a poor experience in the past because we've had free trade agreements since the last century with some countries and regions. They haven't worked for us. So we were no longer prepared to get into an agreement which doesn't work for us. We were no longer sort of staring at a scenario where we had no options. I think by then our economy had shown its resilience. Our trade had shown that it could grow even without the 5 or 6 or 10% tariff advantage that you might get if you had a free trade agreement. And we said, no, a bad agreement, is not worth getting into. So that's why we decided not to. But we are open to something that works well. And therefore, the bilateral track that we started with Australia after we walked out of the RCEP has worked beautifully. We've sort of managed to negotiate a very extensive agreement in double quick time. And that's because it was clearly obvious that there was value on both sides in that. So it will endure. I think the relationship between India and Australia, it's not a spark. I think it is a fire that has, caught some ground by now.
We've got a question at the back there, I believe.
Hi. Okay, cool. Dr. Liz,
Yeah.
good. Dr. Liz Buchanan, I'm Head of Research for the Royal Australian Navy. Question on AUKUS for you, if I may. Last few weeks, we've seen Japan really lean into AUKUS, seeking a supporting role. Where does India fall when it comes to AUKUS?
Well, all the countries which make up all 3 countries which make up the AUKUS partnership are very good friends with India. They are all, each one of them is very good. So if in their sovereign determination, something is required for their own needs, we respect that decision and we support anything that makes them feel secure and more able.
Yes, Susan.
Commissioner, if I could ask about our respective relations with China. Since you've been here for a while, I'm sure you would have noticed, I think, the sense of relief with which the thaw in Australia's relations with China has been greeted broadly in the media, except for some aspects of it, and by the public, and certainly amongst diplomats, I would say. What about your relationship with China? I mean, you had quite a serious border war last year or the year before, and I was struck by the critical remarks that you made when you were alluding to China in your remarks. So what does India bring to the table with respect to its relations with China in the Quad?
Well, thank you. our job as diplomats and political leaders' jobs as leaders and ministers, etc., is to make things happen, is to make things work, is to smooth out problems. And I completely respect and understand that Australia is attempting to do that right now because of several years of a rocky road, as it were. The same is the case with us. We would also like good relations with everybody, including with China. And we did have very good relations with China right up to the border attack, which took us by surprise a couple of years ago that you referred to. And for us, it's a serious breach of trust. It's also for us an action that has still not been explained to us. My foreign minister has asked the Chinese foreign minister multiple times, well, why did you do or attempt to do what you did? I mean, what really was your objective, etc.? We don't have clear answers. So we've been very clear-headed in our approach that, trust has been lost. In this particular case, written agreements that had guaranteed peace and tranquility on our border. It's a contested border. It's, large parts of the India-China border is not yet delimited. It's not yet been, completely decided upon. But we've agreed that even as we continue to discuss that particular issue, there will be peace and tranquility on the border. And these are written agreements, more than one agreement of the early 1990s. And that had allowed our relationship to flourish in a very normal way in every manner, from trade and investment to, movement of people, all sorts of things. And then suddenly we find that those agreements were torn up and we were attacked the way we were. So we've been very clear in our mind that we desire good relations again, but we will not do it unless there is complete restoration of the status quo ante, until and unless the aggression that we faced is completely withdrawn and taken back. Till that time, there cannot be any good. That's the official policy, and talks are going on, various rounds of it. Let us see where it ends up. But you have to say that I must say that beyond governments, there are also publics, and the public in India, I will not comment on what the public in Australia feels or majority of it. You are better informed, but the public in India, is extremely upset with what happened. And, in a sense, I think it's fair to say that China has lost a lot of trust by what it attempted to do.
Desmond?
Desmond Woods, councillor of this branch. So thank you for your very frank and helpful position statements on India in so many areas. There is one area I wish to address, which is perhaps the elephant in the room, which is that to date this year, the Modi government has not publicly condemned the invasion of Ukraine. I don't know what back channels have been used, if any. Various explanations have been given for this. One of them relates to defense acquisition and supply chains. That doesn't seem to me to be wholly convincing. Can you account for the reticence of the Modi government to come out and condemn this egregious violation of the rules-based order you were talking about?
Well, I don't think there's one single phrase or set of words, that everyone must adopt to react to a particular situation, right? We've chosen our words and statement with care. And we have, when, for example, we've abstained on a vote in the United Nations Security Council, of which we are a member at the moment, we've given an explanation of our vote. And in that explanation, we've used terms, we've stated our belief in what is the right way, right path, in fairly clear terms. What happens is that, I'm not saying it's you, but a lot of people would simply go by the headline in the Guardian or the Sydney Morning Herald and will not take the time out to read the explanation of vote. But if you were to read it, even way back in February itself, we called for the immediate cessation of violence and hostilities. We spoke about the cost of human lives. We spoke about respect for sovereignty and territorial integrity of states. We stressed on the need to honor the principles of the United Nations Charter. We stressed that dialogue and diplomacy is the way forward, and we regretted that the path of diplomacy was given up. Now, if someone doesn't understand exactly what we are saying and what we mean, and only wants particular words, which they would prefer, well, then that may not happen. Every country needs to tread carefully. Every country needs to take care of its interests. We in India cannot forget that for many decades, the only country that came to our help when we needed it, even when we were under attack, when we were at war with China, for example, with Pakistan, for example, in the 60s and 70s, the only country that came to our assistance was not the West. The only country that came to our assistance was the then Soviet Union. Till very recently, the West would refuse to sell to us, weapons and platforms that we needed, for reasons that you are well aware of, because you had to possibly say, hey, I am in your camp. We don't do camps. India doesn't do alliances. We don't take sides, right? So that was when, and right now, and what that resulted in is that because of those decades when we didn't have anyone else to turn to, our military equipment, a lot of it, about 60 to 65% even now of it, is of former Soviet or Russian origin. And at the same time, we have a live border. The lady referred to what happened to us 2 years ago. We have a live border that has forced us to raise new mountain divisions, to equip them so that they can remain at high altitudes for 12 months of the year, including peak winter. Otherwise, the normal deployments would be that winters, when the passes would freeze up and all, you would come down to peace locations. We've had to do all of that. And we have to therefore be ready just in case we require it. Now, that requires spare parts, that requires ammunition for the legacy equipment, which continues to be of that origin. I don't think I can jeopardize that when I'm facing a live, just for the sake of saying a few words which would be preferable for some. I have other ways of doing it. You've seen our Prime Minister a few months ago directly tell the Russian president that this is not the age of war. You've seen us being wooed by many to say, hey, can you please make sure that somehow there could be a dialogue and there could be an end to the situation over there. You can see that our partners, including Australia, including Japan, including the United States, understand our reticence, understand what we can say perhaps publicly or not, understand our point of view, and do not sort of castigate us for what we are saying or doing.
Thank you. Question over here.
Thank you so much, and thank you sir, for the opportunity.
Just let us know who you are.
Hello, everyone. And thank you, sir. My name is Abhishek. I work for Department of Defense. Thank you for answering that question. My question was very similar to what has just been asked, and you have obviously given a very good answer. I will just slightly twist the question now that you have already explained the reason why India has been with Soviet Union or Russia. Now, in your daily dealings, or basically with the Quad that has recently been formed, at your level, what are the challenges and difficulty you feel or you face, and how do you manage when you sort of discuss these bilateral agreements let's just quote.
Well, thank you. You know, I'm in a very happy space at the moment. You know, being High Commissioner to Australia at the moment of India is a joy. The relationship is going swimmingly well in every which way, and I think I explained some of that in my talk. My challenge really is how to sustain this, and what next, and how to dream up of even closer interaction. My biggest challenge remains the economic area. My biggest challenge that I've set to myself and my priority, because as I said, that has been a bit of an underperformer. Our trade sounds good, but it's way below potential. If you look at the size of the Indian economy, if you look at the size of the Australian economy, if you look at our growth rate and Australia's growth rate, our trade should be much, much more than what it is. That's my challenge, and that's what I grapple with all the time.
All right, I might come in as 12th man with a question here, High Commissioner. You mentioned India's development assistance programs in various parts of the world, and I think in the Pacific was one of your reference points. And there are no doubt others, but could you let us know what are the benefits of Indian development assistance to the third world? It goes presumably beyond building bridges and roads.
Some based approaches that development assistance from India.
Thank you. Well, I did try and explain that our approach itself is that our development assistance is done in a demand-driven way. We don't decide, if we've got X million dollars that we would like to spend assisting another, let's say, one country or another partner. We don't, in our own mind, or our officials in our own mind, decide on where that should go. Because, my priorities, could be quite different from really their needs. So we let them decide what they need. So very often, what that has led to is that our development assistance projects, while dollar for dollar, it might sound like significantly less than what richer country do, the impact of that is often far, far higher. I was ambassador to Afghanistan, and we've got a large development program there simply because they need it. They're a close neighbor and a very, very important friend. And we had small, what we used to call high impact, quick community development projects, which means they are quick to execute and they are high impact. And we would let the Afghans decide what that would be. And we would get requests from districts, district governors or state chief ministers, etc., of what it is they wanted. And it was always about, a few classrooms, a primary healthcare center, an irrigation channel, a small bridge to connect remote communities, etc. They were easy to do, very quick to execute, and the goodwill they earned for us simply because they were so realistic and made such a difference to the community benefit of that. My total portfolio there is about $3 billion, in Afghanistan, what we have spent cumulatively till today. That would compare with maybe $1 trillion that some other groups of countries have apparently spent there. If you ask the Afghans, where is that money? Many of them will say we can't see it. When you ask them where is the Indian development projects, they'll say, well, look at that. That's the way we do it.
Time for one very quick question, Jim.
Sorry, just the
We might have you.
Hi, Commissioner. As you mentioned, India is becoming quite an information technology superpower. And yet, we've got the threat of technological decoupling happening. And I was just wondering, what's India's views on that? How are you going to sort of manage or adapt to that possible scenario?
Technological what?
Decoupling, where America sort of limited its exported chips to China, where we might have two arenas in which we have different technologies operating.
I don't, I really doubt if an entire decoupling is at all possible, simply because there are domestic capabilities, etc., that will fill up for anything else that China, for example, may not be able to get from the United States. But to an extent, there would be a difference because certain categories of products or, perhaps certain technologies, cutting edge, latest, going forward, futuristic, etc., may be denied. I wouldn't necessarily call that a decoupling, but I would certainly call it reducing dependencies, and ensuring that, see, the experience of the last few years, has shook, companies and governments and countries to the very core. COVID pandemic realized, my country, to see, when the COVID pandemic hit in early 2020, would you imagine we suddenly discovered that this country, India, third largest economy in the world on PPP terms and fifth largest otherwise, country of 1.8 billion people, we didn't have a single manufacturer of masks. That was the extent of dependence. I dare say Australia may not have had either, and so many others. Ventilators and, PPP kits, etc. Simply because, it just wasn't possible, I suppose, over the years or decades to, manufacture these things anywhere other than there. It just felt so easy. But those over dependencies themselves, once the COVID pandemic hit, we all realize how vulnerable that makes us. So these are all attempts at not necessarily denying something to somebody, but also making sure that something remains with you.
We might draw on those parties moving forward. Thank you very much, High Commissioner. It's been a very comprehensive, wide-ranging discussion of economic interests and values. Thank you for coming to deliver tonight. Thank you.